So we just want to spend a little bit of time on data quality. So who here's got really good data quality?
Oh, sorry.
You have? Yeah? How do you know that?
The report that comes back.
Okay, good. Because there are reports in Cat 4 and that you can see looking at your data quality, things like age of medications, you know, on the current medication list, amount of data that is collected in certain areas or not collected. So there's a range of ways to look at it. There's been a lot of improvement in the clinical information systems that you use. And certainly some here will definitely remember back to the 90s when, you know, general practices received virtually a pile of computers to do e-prescribing. And that was the entrance into, you know, computing really for general practice where, and a lot of people just used it for prescribing, to be perfectly honest, and that was the tool for prescribing, and the rest of it, you know, there wasn't much else put into the machine. Fortunately, when we started work on the APCC program in 2004, the e-prescribing work was really quite strong by then, and we could actually use a lot of that data to help us with some of the indicators around diabetes and CPD, because the prescribing tells a story in its own right for people with some of these chronic conditions. But the e-health reform over the last probably 6, 7, 8 years, even probably 10 years now, has really created a huge amount of work, you know, underneath the tip of the iceberg. So there's a lot of power there now, and we're seeing great growths now in interoperability, e-communication or secure communication, and electronic processing. So where things, you know, used to be done manually, now the machines can do them automatically. So you're receiving, like, pathology, comes in, the machine processes it, it's there. Those sort of things are just going to get better and better as we go ahead. But it actually is really difficult to work if your processes for data collection and maintenance aren't good, because the machine can only ever do so much. So it is essential for safe delivery of service. There's no doubt about that. The data need to be accurate, timely and complete. So it's okay saying I'm just going to collect what I need today, but if you actually don't have a full picture of the person, and it will change for some people, a very healthy young person coming through the door, you know, doesn't need the sort of collection around a person with, you know, comorbid chronic diseases, etc. But if you're putting rubbish in, rubbish out, if you're just collecting it badly, then it's just never going to work. It needs to be coded wherever it can be possibly coded. And yes, there's always contextual information that needs to be captured, that's for sure. But where it can be coded, get it coded. Where it can be electronically processed, get it processed by the machine, etc. And it'll be a lot better, there's no doubt about it. So retrospective versus, you know, a line in the sand, as I call it. Certainly, I prefer the tortoise approach. If you go back to your teams and you get a good understanding of how you're going to work with data quality going forward, you'll be able to get a process in place to make sure for every person that comes in, their data are up to date, complete, accurate. And over a year, you'll actually end up with a really clean set of data. Certainly we've seen people when we've had specific disease categories run, and we'll be looking at people with COPD and they look at the measures and they go, that is absolutely not right, we're a lot better than that. And they look at their data, they go, oh, that's terrible. So they go back and retrospectively clean their data up, and that's fine. It's a lot of effort, and I'm not sure you'd want to go about it. But then, unless they've actually got a good process in place, 6 months later the data's garbage again, because other people in the team aren't doing it. So unless your team's on board and they actually know what their role is with the data collection and the maintenance of the quality, then you're going to go backwards at some point. And there's lots of data cleaning tools you can use if you want to make an effort to get that data clean in a bit of a hurry. But unless you actually have that process in place where the team know what their roles are with data, 6 months' time, it's going to be rubbish again. We'll certainly have a degree of error in it. Okay, so does anyone have any examples of sophisticated data systems that are available now? Healthcare's not one of them. Social media. How good is the use of data around social media? Banking. Unfortunately, the ATO is getting really good too. I know, everything's getting linked up and they know precisely where everything is. It's getting harder and harder. But my favourite, as an example, is this one. Has anyone used Flight Radar 24? It's a pretty cool app. Aviation is another area that has really got its data worked out, and thankfully they do, because it's pretty important. But this is Flight Radar 24, and this is me there on the tarmac in Sydney the other week. And I'm just about to fly out to Tamworth. I was actually sitting on the plane, actually. I wasn't standing on the tarmac. But then the pilot starts the plane up and starts to head off, and the plane appears. Now, I'm just outside of that. I'm in the geospatial bit out, but you know, I was in the plane. And I go, okay, so then I click on the plane, and it tells me, oh, this is a QF flight. It's going from Sydney to Tamworth. It's actually 0 feet off the ground at the moment, because that was positive, because I was on the ground. And 14 knots, we just moving along the runway. You go, that's fantastic. Look at that, God. And then you pull out, and that's the view around Australia. And then even just this, looking in here, this is New York, and in here they've got helicopters in here too. Can you imagine the management of, you know, airlines around it or anywhere, and the need for good data? And these guys have got this very good, and obviously, you know, in most cases they don't even put data in. I mean, it's always around trying to even use things like the barcodes and the apps and all these things. So you're not actually trying to type somebody's name in. You get to know them once, you lock it down, you get it right, and then you just simply reuse it all the time. And that's where health will eventually get, you know, in a number of years' time. I mean, could you imagine how these sort of things would work, you know, if all of a sudden the data quality was like healthcare?
Missing data.
You probably wouldn't be getting in a plane. You might just drive. But you take this a bit further. You imagine if you walk into KFC and your phone says, "What are you doing? Get out of there! It's not part of your plan." But it'll get better. But if we don't have that data quality, the systems, they just can't work for you. You've got clinical systems at the moment that are getting pretty good. And they're going to get better, but they need the data quality. So when we're going to put this stuff up on the board for the general practices to see, the teams, to say, what are we going to look at? This displaying data is important. We're going to just go through a couple of examples here just to give you some ideas around how you're going to display it, but there are some pretty obvious ways forward. This is, the next few slides are all of the same data. This is a scatter plot, and you can go, okay, you can see a bit of stuff there, but I'm not sure how meaningful it is. This is the tabular data that drove that scatter plot, and you can sort of start to see that there's, well, you can see there's a decline here, obviously, over time, variation across the lines. And this is a simple run chart, where you can see clearly it's heading down in this case, which I don't know what the meaning of this is. I mean, these are appointment times and the number of prescriptions prescribed per appointment time. This is not meant to mean anything, by the way, it's just simply a display. This is another example, a little bit more of a research example over here and quality improvement examples here, but just to point out the importance of looking at it over time and in conjunction with what you're doing in change. So we're seeing a 70 here and a 30 there, so before the change and after the change, and you go, well, that's pretty sensational, assuming that a drop to 30 was what you wanted and wasn't going the other way. But that's okay, but the run charts over there, there's 3 run charts. Now the data points on those, all of those 3 run charts produce that. So it's been set up by a university to demonstrate the difference in the run charts. Only one of these run charts is actually an improvement as a result of the change. Anyone have an idea which one it would be? Number three, um, number three has seen a really good shift here, but it's actually heading back up. So the change, the intervention did something, there's no doubt about it, but the intervention isn't sustainable for whatever the reason is. Number two, it was always improving. So your change here has actually done nothing for it, because it was always going down. One's the only one with a sustainable change after that drop. Now its variation's still there, there's no doubt about it, a bit of variation in it, but it's the only one that has had that shift and has maintained a general trend down. And that's just to point out that over time is really important, and understanding where you're making a change in the system and what you're doing about it. If you're seeing a positive result after that change and it's not general trend down, then that's a good sign. But certainly keeping it simple, and we generally recommend the run charts or trend charts. Get your baseline in place before you start. So if you've got the area you want to work on over the year, you know the measures you want for it, get your baseline set, and then work out what you're going to do about it in a very meaningful way. And we'll be going through things that how to use the model for improvement later. But you can track it over time and measure how you're performing. Certainly, with your teams, you'll be looking to get the baseline set. You'll be looking at the changes that occur after you put in place an intervention of some kind. And but also, if it's one of the key things is if it actually isn't getting better after you change, well, you're wondering what's the purpose? So certainly you'll be testing the change in small parts, and as a result of those tests, you'll have a degree of confidence that when you put in a change in a more rolled out uniform way, then you'll get the improvement. But if you're not, well, you've got to sort of ask yourself, why aren't we getting this? I mean, you should be seeing a change. So we're certainly looking to describe what happens in the cohort and identify improvements. But one of the big things is to keep the team motivated with change over time, because the charts will certainly keep them engaged. One of the key things we want to do in quality improvement is remove variation. So who here drives a Hyundai? Kia? Enjoying that 7 years warranty? Well, that's what the car industry has got down to now, where, years ago you'd buy a car and you'd get 20,000 miles in a year if you're lucky. Now, unlimited kilometres in 7 years, because they've effectively removed the variation from the manufacturing process. I mean, they know so much about these vehicles now, how well they can get them to run for how long. They're giving away massive warranties, and it's all because they know that they've got the variation out of the process. They've worked on it very hard. There's common cause and special cause. So the common cause is really what we're looking at, routine variation. That's the variation we really want to get down to a very, very small level. Exceptional cause variation is generally something from another event. So you could be driving to work, and the times you drive to work and arrive at work each day will vary. There will be a little bit of variation around it, things like you get stuck at lights or things like that. But if you come across an accident and you're 30 minutes, 40 minutes late or an hour late, well, that's exceptional. I mean, often you can't do anything about it. Nice to know what it is and understand it, but you can't do much about it. So certainly with a routine, we want to bring that noise in the system right down to nothing. So when you're looking at a general practice environment, somebody's coming in for, say, a routine health check, you'd like to think that the person receives every part of that health check, or every person coming through the door receives every part of that health check routinely every time and in a really efficient manner, and getting it right down to a well-prescribed, well-known and well-implemented process, and not having it done slightly differently by one of the clinicians and slightly different by somebody else, and, well, I didn't have time today and didn't get it done. It's about getting that variation down to nothing, or as little as nothing anyway. Certainly the limits around the variation, initially trying to get it under some control is important, but then you want to just tighten up those limits so you're seeing very, very minor variation occurring.